Mention robots, and many people might first think of a metallic form shaped roughly like a human. Think R2-D2 from the Star Wars movies, with arms and legs and a head and a torso that whirs around, complete with blinking eyes. But actually, robots come in many shapes and sizes, and one of their most common applications today is on a factory assembly line, where they do some of the mundane, repetitive, or dangerous work that humans used to have to do. Robots have come a long way since their early days in science fiction, and one group of local students at Burr and Burton Academy have formed a club, actually a team, that competes in an annual state championship that measures whose robot is best at performing certain tasks. The team, which organized last year under the leadership of Michael Cole, an area technologist who helped install the state-of-the-art video system at Applejack Field, which televises soccer matches and other sporting events held there, was a finalist for one of the highest awards at the event last year, named the Think Award, in its first season. It's the only robotics team of its kind in Bennington County, and they are back for another try this year. We had a chance to discuss the team and robots with Michael Cole and the team members in a recent Zoom interview. All right. Well, I guess just to get things started, how did the team get organized in the first place? Mike, this is probably a question that you could take first. How did the team get started and organized, and what was the inspiration for it?
Oh, great. Well, thanks, Andrew. And thanks for having the team on for today's interview. So the team was started in September 2019, so right at a year ago now that the team got started. This was the first time to have a competitive high school level robotics team in Bennington County. We've got a lot of great schools in the area with great academic programs, and some of those schools even teach robotics in the classroom. But prior to this team's formation, there were no competitive high school level robotics teams in Bennington County. So our team was established to create some opportunities for high school age students, grades 7 through 12, to have an opportunity to come together as a team and to do everything in about 6 months that a startup business has to do, which would include organizing itself as a group, fundraising to get the dollars to cover the equipment, the tools, the registration fees that are going to be involved, designing a robot from the ground up, starting from a blank page, programming it, developing strategy that we can compete in robotic competitions with, and then having extensive documentation on it, along with all the programming for it, all within 6 months' time. So it's very much like a startup business that has to go through all of those things under the pressures of real-time clock pressure. So we set up as a 4-H club just because that gave us a way that we could draw in students from multiple schools in the area, as opposed to any one individual school. So in fact, we had students on our team last season that were from Burr and Burton Academy, and also from Manchester Elementary Middle School, since the program is for grades 7 through 12. And
I guess I'll just go around the rest of the Zoom room here, and maybe we'll start with you, Isaac, since you're at the top of the screen there. What was it about robotics that interested you in this and prompted you to, join the club?
Well, I had done a little bit with like Lego robotics before I joined the team, so I was already interested in this kind of stuff. And my mom wanted to be a coach for the team, so I figured that it would be cool to join the team and help build the robot, since it's like a big step up in robotics. And it just seemed like a lot of fun to do for a few months.
And Taylor?
I was actually already taking a robotics course through BBA at that time. So on top of that, I was able to expand my learning. And then, of course, me and Asa, the other guy who just graduated off of our team, we were actually sitting down at lunch when we got the invitation from our robotics teacher. And we're like, hey, this seems cool. And then we both decided to join.
And Charlotte, what was your inspiration for this?
I'm kind of in the same boat as Taylor. So I was taking robotics at school, and I had really enjoyed it the year before, and I was in the second level last year. And I got the email from our teacher, and I was like, hey, this sounds really fun. And so it was just a fun way to learn more about robotics.
I mean, how does that robot work? I mean, how do you transmit instructions to it to make it put the blocks in the right place or whatever other task it's supposed to do?
Well, as far as software goes, there's apps on both a phone on the robot and a phone connected to the controller. And that app, you give code that you've previously programmed, and it transmits that to the robot. And there's both an autonomous mode and a self-driver mode. So one where the robot goes off by itself and you have code for that. And after 30 seconds, it'll execute from the phone your own code to drive it. And then it receives instruction from the controllers.
And so that's the software side of it. Then on the mechanical side, then all of those instructions have to be converted into motions and commands and senses and things like that. So Taylor and Charlotte, why don't you guys talk a little bit about kind of the mechanicals and the hardware sides of it all?
So first off, we have to build our own chassis just from scratch. And then that houses, we use 4 mechanism wheels. Mechanism are omnidirectional wheels that allows you to go left, right, forwards, backwards, and diagonally as well, based off the rotation through the programming that Isaac would program. Then those are all connected to motors, and then those motors are connected to the hub. The hub is how we receive the information programmed from the phones. So then from there, we also have what we use, just basic design. We used a pickup design where we use wheels to pick up blocks, and then we stored it. And then, of course, we also had an arm to try to place blocks as well. Those are just some of the basic components. And then obviously we went through a lot of things where we used drawer slides at one point, and then we kind of expanded it from there.
That sounds good. Charlotte, do you want to add anything to the kind of the hardware?
I'm trying to think, but I don't. We had 2 sets of drawer slides, one for the up and down movement of the block and one across for the arm. We had a lot of servos in use. We had the little gripper thing, which we had to try a lot of different grippy, like silicone stuff to make sure it actually would grab the block. And that was hard to make because we had to fit it into that little space. And we also had some size constraints because it's what's the size? It was like 16 by something, 16 by 18.
Almost, yeah. And so the requirements say the robot has to fit inside of an 18-inch by 18-inch by 18-inch footprint. However, the contest, the starting position of the robot, in order to go underneath some of the low bridge parts of the playing field, it had to actually be able to collapse itself down to a vertical height beneath 14 inches to be able to clear. So we've got size constraints, weight constraints, power constraints, mechanical constraints, software constraints that all basically have to kind of be managed in the design space.
Now, will the robot you're going to be building for this year's competition, will it be similar to the one from last year that was in the video, or is it a whole different kind of device altogether?
So, great question. Our season for the upcoming year starts on September 12th. That's when the challenge gets announced in terms of exactly what the field contest is going to involve. So we don't know for sure yet what all of the scoring devices are going to be, whether the robot has to pick things up and move them, whether it has to throw things, launch them, so to speak.
Although we probably won't be throwing things because there was a rule in the last one that we can't launch any projectiles.
That's true, but I have read in some of the pre-release information that suggests there may be some sort of something where it briefly goes airborne in this upcoming challenge.
I really want for that to happen.
As well as in previous years, there have been aspects where the robot had to be able to vertically suspend itself, reach up and grab something, and then pull itself up off of the playing surface using just the power and mechanics of the robot itself. And, it's a 45-pound-ish robot. You've got a lot of work to do to figure out how to accomplish that. So those things will be announced in terms of the contest requirements on September 12th. And we will start from a blank page, designing a completely new robot to accomplish those challenges to maximize our points when we get into the competition.
So that must be what the engineering notebook is all about that I was reading about in a couple of the contest descriptions there. It sounds like that notebook is a fairly significant part of the entire project.
Yeah, and the design process of it all.
Right. So everything that's, and this is something where the team really did well in its rookie year, was using a math-based and science-driven and documentation related process so that we would design and analyze and then begin building so that we could test what would work and how big do things need to be, how big do motors need to be, what kinds of rotations are going to be required for the velocities we need to handle, whether it's the robot moving on the field or velocities of pieces going through the robot when we're processing them through. So the notebook is a place where all of that math and science and documentation and computer-aided design all gets documented and then is part of the judging process that teams are evaluated on. I think the team really has a lot to be really proud of in its rookie year. Of the 31 teams that competed in the Vermont State Championship, our team, even though we were a rookie, was recognized as one of the finalists for one of the top awards, which is named the Think Award, and it's specifically recognizing the quality of the engineering notebook.
So I guess how last year anyway, how did you all work together on this? I'm assuming you probably all met somewhere in the same room and built a robot or worked on the design, or would that be the right way to understand it?
Well, we started, Isaac, at your place for the first several weeks. Do you remember how long that was?
I think those were about an hour long.
And for how many weeks did we continue meeting there? Probably maybe a month?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Right. And then we transitioned to meeting here in town at the Masonic Lodge. The Masons here in town were very generous to allow us to meet once a week there at their facility during our last season. And we would meet there and build and program on a weekly basis. And that was a great facility for us, and the Masons were very generous to allow us to have used it. This coming year is going to be a little bit different because of the COVID pandemic. So a lot of our plans to work together are going to be really using a lot more digital design so that we can, when possible, do things perhaps working from home using computer-aided design software and math and physics analysis software before we actually have to then get together. When we do meet, we're planning to meet at one of the family's houses here in the area and actually working in their yard while the warm weathers permit us to, and then as things start getting a little bit rainy and chilly, perhaps moving into a garage space that maybe has the garage door open for ventilation. But we'll be following Vermont OSHA safety guidelines and also 4-H club guidelines from University of Vermont Extension, so that we're following all best known methods and current best practices for preventing the spread of the pandemic. So our season will go on. We'll just make more use of electronic and digital and virtual work before we get together then, and rather than meeting at the Masonic Lodge this coming year, we'll likely be doing a lot of our work at one of the family's houses and at the front yard, backyard, and in their garage.
This year you're going to be going back to the Vermont State Challenge, which is part of that first tech challenge. Is that what the competition is called?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. Once we figure out what the challenge is and what robot we need to build, and if we build that on time, I think we should be able to go back this year, assuming that they have it.
Now, do you have to sort of submit a design in advance to kind of quote unquote qualify for the competition, or or is it just, are you just sort of given a general set of instructions, and you kind of whatever you come up with is going to be tested on the battlefield there?
So there's no, in our state, there's no pre-qualification, but in some states where there's a much larger number of teams in those states, like in Massachusetts, those teams have to go through some, I guess you would call them regional contests and district level contests, and advance beyond those, having scored highly enough against the other teams at those events in order to qualify to make it to their state's championship. In Vermont, presently, last year, there were 16 high school level teams, 13 of which went to the Vermont State Championship. But there were no district or regional level events for us to have to get qualified in. However, because there were only 13 or of 16 teams in the state, and these state championships really have to have 30 to 32 teams competing, then Vermont had to open its doors and welcome teams from outside of the state to come to the Vermont State Championship. Our hope this year is that more teams will be formed, so that it'll be hopefully more and more Vermont teams competing at the Vermont State Championship, ideally so that we don't have to add additional teams from outside of the state. Some of the teams that came in were the former year World Championship winners, which is a pretty highly talented, experienced team to be competing against in your rookie year.
Yeah, no kidding. So if everything works out as it's going to work out, and you win the state championship, then you go on to a national competition in Detroit. Is that what would happen?
That's the idea. So each year there's the winners of the state level competitions in our league, which is called First Tech Challenge, go on to the world level competitions. And it's actually held where there's half of the world contest is in Detroit, Michigan, and the other half, based on geographies, that contest is held in Houston, Texas. So for the section of the world we are in, if we advance beyond the Vermont State Championships, then, or whoever does, that team will then go on to the World Championships that would be in roughly the May 2021 timeframes, held in Detroit, Michigan. And that'll be a large event. That'll probably have 10 to 15,000 people in the audience attending.
I guess I just wanted to ask you all kind of what you saw as the future of robotics. Are we on the cusp of seeing robots sort of do a lot of tasks that used to be done by humans, freeing up people to kind of do other things? Or are we still a long way away from that vision?
It's a great question. It's challenging to look too terribly far into the future. The crystal ball gets a little fuzzier the further out in the future that we look. But for sure, if we look in the relatively nearer term, and I'd really encourage each of the team members here to kind of speak to it from your vantage point, from where you're at right now, and as you look at the next year or 2 years out, both for yourself personally and maybe for your household, what you think about robotics and automation. I know some of the folks here, their parents drive cars that have autonomous driving limited capabilities. And that's an interesting example of robotics. There are things that we've talked about limbs and so forth that are essentially like prosthetics but they have amount of mechanics and electronics and software with them that, in a way, that prosthetic for a person's arm or for their leg and so forth is, in a way, a very specialized type of a robot with perhaps limited intelligence today, but maybe over time it will gain more sensory capability to it and more local processing capability to it as well. So that's a big part of it, I think, for us is kind of what are we doing and seeing now, and what are we using? We don't have a robotic vacuum cleaner in our house, but I would bet that of the 4 or 5 of us on the call here, I would bet probably one of them on this Zoom call probably does.
I think that it really depends on the task, because at the moment, robots are really specialized. So like on assembly lines and stuff, robots are also already doing a lot. And like Mike was saying with vacuum cleaners, I do have one. The charging dock's right there. So they can vacuum and do like chores like that. But a lot of the things that require like higher motor control, they aren't able to do yet. But I expect that eventually they'll be able to do those tasks. You might just need a different robot to do different things, since right now it's very specialized depending on what you need the robot to do.
Definitely a hard topic to think about, especially too far into the future during a current pandemic. But I feel like robotics as a whole has really, I feel like we're about there. I feel like we're about to the brink of where you'd see your ideal future, where these science fiction writers have everyone, robots taking over all these mundane jobs. Because you have really basic, but you have these drones and autonomous robots that are able to do all the dirty work and the majority of our more difficult tasks, like, bomb defusal and just the mundane tasks of scrubbing a ship. But there's still that limited, there's not only limited materials, which is a big deal now, and then the ability to gain those materials, which leads to the whole, global warming thing, which isn't necessarily directly connected to robotics, but that does definitely have an effect on it. But it also depends on the human's ability to program and then be able to sustain the robot, because you need power, but you also need the programming behind it. And I feel like there's a lot of things that us humans do that we can't translate to a program.
That's a great answer, Taylor. Charlotte, what do you think as you look at the future? And I add to what you're about to say, what you're going to be doing with your independent study work here this next year.
Hey, yeah. I don't know where they're going to go. I don't know what's going to happen with robotics. There's a lot that can be done, but I think it's a matter of what will be done and just how people are going to use what we have available, especially since what Taylor said, it's hard to get our hands on some materials that are necessary to make a certain robot. And it's also, like what Isaac said, they're not very versatile right now, and maybe hopefully that'll change as time progresses, then we learn more about what we can do with what we have. But that should be, I think that hopefully they'll definitely be used for more mundane things, but I don't think they'll be able to completely replace what humans bring to those dirty work jobs.
Can you mention also, Charlotte, your independent study work this year coming up?
Yeah, so at our school we only have 2 levels of robotics, which is very sad. But Mr. Morrison, the robotics teacher, he's agreed to let me do an independent study with him this year. So I get to use school time, so I think we get like an hour and 20 minutes to take each class every day. And so he's letting me use that time to work on designs and planning and everything that I want to work on for the FTC project this year. So that'll be the first semester of school for me. Yay!
To what degree does the pandemic we're all struggling with right now either advance or maybe push forward more rapidly than would have been the case had we not had to deal with this, some of the technology, or is it sort of limiting or slowing down some of the research and development that is going into the field?
I'd say it does a little bit of both, because on bigger robots and bigger projects for people like the the research going into it, it's going to be a lot harder because there's not that, like, you can't just have like a group of people work on a project together, because then that's obviously doesn't follow OSHA requirements. So the one-on-one working on a project might be hindered a lot, and then obviously our ability to get the resources to build the robot and further our understanding, that's going to be slowed down. But we are actually at the very start of the whole pandemic, we were looking into these UVD robots. I think it was UVD, but UVC, sorry. UVC robots, and the entire point was that they have started to use robots, and they've started using automation in order to clear hospitals and houses and be able to disinfect. So I feel like in some ways, like automation after this pandemic is going to be, I guess, pushed forwards, and I feel like there's going to be a few breakthroughs in automation. But I feel like some of the bigger projects that require more people and more resources, I feel like those are definitely going to be slowed down.
So one last thing I'd like to add here, 2 points real quick. One was, first, we as a team would like to say our thanks to the generous corporate sponsors here in the Manchester area and in Bennington County that gave us financial support so that we could go bootstrap from standstill start to a rolling robot that had programming and hardware and strategy and documentation all in 5 months. And the companies that we would like to say thank you to would be Pad Print Machinery of Vermont. We'd like to say thank you to our TPW Real Estate, to Vermont Country Store, and to RK Miles, all of those companies that generously gave us donations and support for this first year. It's substantially expensive to acquire all the goods, and we received no funding from taxpayers, from the schools, from any other entity like that. The team bootstraps its funding through soliciting and getting generous support from the corporations in the area and from families who have given us some donations. There is no fee charged to the students themselves to participate in the program. So we are a 4-H club, and this is something that leads me to my second point, which is we are inviting students interested in participating in robotic teams to consider joining us this next season coming up. You can send an email to ftc16221@gmail.com, which is First Tech Challenge 16221, which is our team, an email address that'll come to our team, and we'll send you more information about the team, about the program, and about how you can get involved. So it's an invitation for students grades 7 through 12 here in the area, including those who may be students who have come up to the area. We understand that Vermont schools, or Southern Vermont local towns I'm seeing, are showing 25% population surges in enrollment that are expected coming into this next school year. And I would bet a lot of those are going to be students from big cities that would like to participate in robotics programs here competitively, and we can offer that to them.